Welcome back, everyone. This is Shane Combs here on Expanding the Zone. I'm joined by my brother Matt, as always. And Matt, as we look forward to show 67 this week, we're really excited to talk confidence and how that can impact athletes in today's sports, specifically in the game of basketball, as we've been touching on throughout the basketball season. People have been with us know we've talked mercy rule, assistant coaches, positionless basketball. Then last week on show 66, we talked IQ, and we looked a little bit more of the mental aspect, and just makes a lot of sense as we've come up on a topic this week. We're going to talk a little bit confidence. I think people will really enjoy the show and be able to relate to it with things that they've been a part of growing up, and even as they watch it now, maybe they coach it, maybe they watch it as a fan, maybe even as a parent they watch it in their own kids. As always, we want to thank Dr. Chris Good for the support here on the YouTube channel. If you're out there listening to us on your podcast app, we appreciate that. Check us out on over on YouTube there with SBC Sports Zone, and if you're on YouTube, make sure you have us on your podcast app so you can get us on, listen to us in the car there on the way to and from work. So, Matt, on that note, show 67, welcome. We're talking confidence, something that some people might say you didn't lack back in your playing day. The In all seriousness, kind of open us up here. Talk to us about what brought this on, and why we think we can go so many different ways with it here this evening.
Well, I think Shane, as a coach, we all want confident players, right? But we wanted to, I think you have to you define what you mean as confident. And I think we want players who truly have a belief in their ability to do whatever their role is, to do what you ask them to do what needs to be done. And I think every coach wants players like that. We'll talk a little bit about different parts of this, I'm sure, but there are sometimes that confidence, that bravado is more of a fake thing, I think, a show. It's not always true, and I think coaches want truly confident players who, like I said, my definition for that would be having a true belief that you can play your role and do it effectively. And I think it's sort of the $1,000,000 question. How do you build that confidence? It's not something that's easy to coach. Some people may believe it's impossible to coach. How do you get a player to that level? How do you get a group of players to that level? I think it's a question coaches have always wrestled with. So it's going to be interesting to talk about it. I think as we dive a little deeper into it, it's way more of a complex issue than it might first appear.
Well, and the topic ended up coming. It's funny you say that, because when the topic was coming up for a show idea, my original thoughts were so basic, and I thought, well, that'll be kind of an easy thing to unpack. And then as I started to unpack it, I started to realize, wait a minute, there's more to this. And my English language arts background of almost 20 years, I guess I start very literal, and I look, well, what is the definition of confidence? And you're talking about words like feeling and belief, and someone or something that uses the word trust. It's a self assurance. It's kind of an appreciation of one's abilities or qualities. And so when I take it in the most literal sense, okay, we know what that means, but then it becomes very abstract sometimes when you start to apply it to something, in my opinion. Is it through repetition? Is it through technique? Is it through performance? Is it through past experience? All of those things, I think, play a factor. Why don't we start there in terms of talking a little bit about what brought this topic on? And I think that'll start to drive the discussion in a couple different directions.
Well, as we've said on here before, Shane, we listen to other podcasts. We've always been a fan of podcasts, and probably why we got into it ourselves. But as we listen to different ones, and I know we listen to some that are basketball, we listen to some that I listen to a college football podcast, I listen to a golf podcast, listen to all these different things, and this topic seems to come up quite a bit in just different ways. In terms of just dealing with confident players, or in some cases, they're talking about players who lack confidence or whatever. So I think that's probably what spurred us on, Shane, to take this topic on and doing this basketball series that we're in the middle of right now, and just really focusing more on the basketball side of things as it pertains to confident players. It's funny, you started like you said, literally with the definition of what it is. And it kind of got me to thinking the other way, what it's not. I think that what I think that confidence isn't the absence of nervousness. And I think sometimes we get to that point where we think, well, if a player is truly confident, then nothing gets to him. Nothing makes him nervous. One of the podcasts that we listen to, and I've mentioned this before, is the Hank Haney podcast, and it's a golf podcast, and he's mentioned before on there about how he was once the coach of the best player in the world at the time, or maybe of all time, Tiger Woods, and talked about how nervous Tiger Woods would be before a major tournament or going into the first round, and how he would even say uh, I want to practice my first shot of the day because it's going to be a nervous shot, and you're talking about the best player maybe ever, right? And he still
Mm-hmm.
steps out there, and there's moments that make him nervous, but I don't think anybody would ever question his confidence, right? So I think that that would be where I would start of what confidence isn't, and it's not just this freedom from ever being nervous. In fact, I think you can make the argument that being nervous probably means you're in the situations you want to be in as an athlete, right? You're in situations that actually matter, and you're in situations where you're competing for a big prize, so to speak. So, um, I guess that's the first place I would start, is understanding that confident players still deal with the same things that everybody else deals with in terms of nerves, in terms of jitters, in terms of doubt. Because I don't think confidence just does away with all that.
It's interesting because when I start to think about personalities and I start to think about it in the sports scene, maybe I could almost use the two of us as an example, or I can think of other high school teammates I had, and kind of form some examples. But in some ways, it's truly a personality trait that comes through. Like with myself as an athlete, even now, sometimes I'm a little bit more technical. I'm a little bit more realistic. Maybe quote unquote stay within myself, as we like to say in sports, right? It's kind of almost how I always played the game. Maybe that was a strength. Maybe it was a weakness. Maybe sometimes I understood my limitations, but maybe sometimes I sold myself short. Where a lot of times you've always been more of an athlete. You're very intelligent about the sports that you play, but you always had a different kind of mindset. Even when we were teammates, I could start to understand that you were just wired differently. You know what I mean? And remember when we talked positionless basketball, we talked old school point guard position. I got thinking in the car today when I was driving and prep for the show. I just had a chance to coach an outstanding point guard at Paint Valley High School, Avery McFadden. Avery was a young lady who, um, she was a winner. She was a winner, and in her 4 years at Paint Valley, she was the winningest basketball player in the last 25 years of the school. She was, like I said, she had over. Now she could have been 1,000 point scorer, but it really wasn't her mentality. She was more about, these are all unofficial, but she's probably somewhere around 750, 800 points. There'd be nights she scored 16, 17 points, and she'd go perfect from the floor. Like she didn't miss a field goal, didn't miss a free throw. She was never going to consistently shoot the ball enough to score 20, 25, 30 points in a game. But she had over, 600 rebounds. I've seen a lot of kids honoring 500 career rebounds. We didn't even know to do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I mean, she was a point guard, had over 600 rebounds. Um, Probably knocked on the door 300 assists. My point, I say all that to say this, is certain players, I think, have confidence in certain skill sets or different things, but I think a lot of it comes down to their personality. Do you see that? You were a big time scorer. I'm sure you had to have nights where you started 0 for 5, 1 for 7, and it never phased you. You know what I'm saying? You're able to shoot through that where other people don't have that ability. Take me through that a little bit. I think it's a great place to start because I think we just say, well, this player has confidence, this player doesn't. But I also think it has personality traits that go in our everyday life that kind of carry over into our sports world. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. I do think people's personalities have something to do with it. I think that there are people, and we all know these types of players who are sort of the alpha, right? The person who kind of thinks that or just kind of has that tendency to want to be out in front or to lead or whatever. And I think, but I would say this too, Shane. I think like you just use her as an example. I think there's different ways to be confident. I don't think it always has to be an outward thing. I think sometimes, one of the things I've always felt like within basketball and trying to develop confident players, to me, the confidence, I almost work backwards from this. Okay. So I'll just give you this and then just let you run with it a little bit. But I almost work backwards in my explanation of how I would try to help develop a confident player as a coach. And that, I would that player's confidence ultimately is going to come from his or her preparation and how good they feel at what they do, or like how much they trust their skill level based on those hours and hours, right? Of, if you're a scorer, you feel like you can score because you've put in all this time of working on shooting the basketball, working on one-on-one moves, working on all those skill development things, right? That you do, you're practicing constantly to perfect that role. But if, as I work backwards, and here's what I mean by this, what's the player's role? Well, so before you even get to that, where you're practicing to perfect that role, what is your role, right? And I think it's a coach's job to put players in positions where they can be successful. We've talked about this before. If you throw a player in a position that they're not capable of being successful in, well, then they probably aren't going to develop confidence within that role. And then where does that start? Well, that starts with some honest one-on-one conversation sometimes, right? From a coach, like, listen, here's what I think you can do, and here's what I think you can't do. And those can be uncomfortable sometimes, right? But you're putting kids in situations where they can be successful. Listen, I don't think you've got the ability at the varsity level to score enough to where I want you taking 10 shots. I just don't want that. I do think you have the ability to rebound, defend. I think you have the ability to set good screens, to bring toughness to our team. So I need you to practice perfecting that role and become confident in that role. You know, you use me as an example, I'll use you. I always felt like you were very confident in your role. Okay. And you didn't shoot nearly the number of shots that I shot, right? Or even try to do that. But would you agree that you were confident in what your coach asked you to do, which is run the point? I mean, so to me, there's these different levels of confidence, but I think it starts with understanding who you are as a player and being confident within that.
It's funny you put it that way because if 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 I were to think back to dribbling a basketball in front of 2,000 people,
Right.
that didn't make me nervous. But still to this day, if you put me on the first tee in front of people watching or whatever on the golf course, right? I'm a little,
Just in front of a foursome
hey,
that's waiting to go
yeah,
behind
hey,
you, right?
hey, a little tidier. I mean, like, so it didn't matter if I was smoothing it out on the range or not. I mean, it was one of
No.
those things where, so there is you mentioned repetition. I think that's where it's at. I think it comes down to when you have put time over and over and over and you rep it. I think you mentioned it earlier. You're still nervous. You still understand there's pressure, but I think the ability to perform in the pressure comes from that repetition over and over. How many times have we said in basketball, just to make it a real elementary, junior high type of example, going to the free throw line, and we want to have a consistent routine, right? If you're working with a young player, what's the first thing you teach them in terms of hey, why don't we try to do it the same way every time? Okay, we want to get real
Right.
comfortable in terms of our rhythm there, and and it's the same way when it comes to different skill sets throughout the game. So I think that preparation. Now, preparation can come through technique. It can come through film work. It can come through whatever it is in terms of preparation. I think I was talking in a TBT meeting. We're getting to that time in the year where we really start to focus in on on some different groupings and some different things as we get closer and closer to the state test. Well, one thing I've always believed in, Matt, is obviously we have our standards and we teach and we teach and we teach. I think a lot of that comes down to that teacher-student relationship in terms of how much that student really wants to perform for that teacher, because on that particular day, it is a little bit of a stressful thing for some students, right? So even in an academic setting, just to use an analogy, a student can have anxiety. A student can have nervousness, and they go through some of these things. Other students are very, very confident. I have that test in front of me here. Give me a pencil. I'll knock this thing out right here in a half hour, and boom, 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 and it's done, or whatever it may be. So, so I think you make some good points about there's technique practice, there's preparation practice, there's mental preparation, right, as well as the physical preparation, and I think all of those things go in. So what I would ask you is if we are giving advice on how to develop the the athlete to be confident, I throw a two-part question at what level of the individual relationship piece that we talk so much about throughout this leadership podcast would you say, and then how much does that transition into what you're talking about, a little bit more of the role and then the techniques and the skill sets that it takes to play those roles?
Yeah, I think that, the relationship piece is just in coaching in general, coach player. I mean, that's just the number one thing. We've talked about it forever, right? I mean, no matter what you're trying to accomplish, it has to start with that. And I think that that's what I was talking about with those honest conversations. I think that as a coach, you develop that relationship and you're able to tell that player, like, here's what I need you to do. Look, I mean, it's like I don't think that you lack confidence if you understand your limitations. I don't think understanding one's limitations means, oh, well, that person's not confident. He thinks he has limitations. Well, yeah, he's smart enough to know he has limitations. We all have limitations, right? And again, trying to be confident within what you're capable of doing because we see it all the time. We see this. I don't know whether you want to call it false confidence or, some kids, just like that test example, some kids will say, yeah, you throw a test in front of me, I've got that. And then they get a D, right? Because they're talking all kinds of stuff before, but why did they get a D? Well, they didn't study, right? They had all the confidence in the world somehow they were going to pass the test, but they didn't actually put the work in to do anything. And it's kind of like that. We've seen it in basketball, right? Kid will go out and start jacking threes and why? Well, because he thinks he can make threes. What causes you to think that? The 25 shots you shot in the whole month of June, is that what made you confident behind a 3-point line?
Mhm.
Because you didn't put the work in for that. And sometimes it might be mom and dad, be confident, take the shot. Well, dad, there's a reason why we don't want him taking that shot because he's not ready for it, right? And what'll happen is I think when people have that false confidence, Shane, it eventually whether you want to admit it or not, deep in your heart and mind, you know the truth, right? And all of a sudden, not only will you not be confident, it'll go the other way on you. You'll really, bury yourself a little bit when you try to do things you're not capable of, don't understand your limitations. So, yeah, back to your point, I think it's a coach's job to develop that relationship with a player, help him or her understand what she can and can't do, and start from there. And again, it's like we always say, accept the role you have and work for the role you want. I mean, there'll be an off season. You can try to expand that role. You can try to get better. But right now, here's what you're good at, and here's what we need you to do. And let's be really, really good at that role and gain that confidence it takes to play that role.
That, that makes total sense. And what I want to do is push the limits here a little bit, partially for discussion purposes, but
Sure.
partially to see if we can't really help people open their mind up to this relationship piece and some different things. Because I don't want to use the term brainwash, right? But there are sometimes you've seen coaches stand up in front of a team, right? And he or she'll give the great speech, or they'll, it's there's some legendary speeches out there. I'm going to go back to I'm getting ready to prepare for whatever it is, like my 29th straight spring of coaching high school baseball here, or whatever. And every time I get into baseball, that a guy by the name of Don Neff, a lot of our listeners will know that name. He means a lot to me. And Don Neff was Hall of Fame baseball coach at Unioda, and he went into the Hall of Fame basically in like the '80s, and then came back for a second part of his career after retirement, and another Hall of Fame career basically. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Well, you know where I'm going with this, Matt. You and I have both have this conversation with Coach Neff at some point. We would always do some things with what was called gravity boots. Real quick, you might be able to describe better. Can you describe to our listeners what gravity boots are, if for people who don't know?
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe you brought up the gravity boots. Anybody that knows Don Neff's gonna love this segment. But
Yeah.
there's kind of, I think, really two different types, or two different types I've been aware of. You have the gravity boots that literally just hook on your ankles, and then you have to like have somebody help you get up, and they got a little hook and they hook over a
Yeah.
bar and you just dangle from a bar.
Yeah.
And the more popular type, I think, because they're more self-sufficient or whatever, are what I would call maybe,
A bit safer.
yeah, like the inversion tables, I would call them, almost, where you
Yeah.
you get on them and just throw your weight back, and it kind of, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, flips back. So
Yeah.
which Mr. Neff, this tells you how education has changed over the years too. He used to have me come down when I was in high school, get me out of class, bring me down, and have me demonstrate on the gravity boots in front of his junior high students on how to use these things.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, can you imagine that today? Teachers would be like, you're taking him out of class for this. But
Yeah.
but no, regardless, that's how I would describe the gravity boots. I don't know. I mean,
Well, that
I
no,
don't
that
want to
was
hijack your.
no, that was really well done. So I want to talk about the ones you're talking about, more of the individual ones you'd put on the ankles or whatever. And like you said, you had to have someone help you up. Talk about team bonding. They basically hold you upside down so that you could hook your gravity boots into like the back of the backboard in the gym or whatever.
Right.
Okay, so again, if you're listening, try to picture this. The person is hanging upside down from these gravity boots off of like the bar on the backboard in a gym. And we're in preseason baseball. He start throwing you baseballs, and you catch it and you throw it back. He's like, here, I want to see you hit a baseball, and he'd give you a bat. You're sitting there upside down. For people on YouTube, you're upside down. You're trying to hit. So you and I both had the same reaction. We didn't even realize it till years later. We both had the same reaction at some point. And I'd say we're not the only two. At some point, we built up the courage to ask him, like, Coach, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. Yeah, Shayne, go ahead. If you know Donnie, that, you know what I mean?
Right.
And why do we do this? Yeah, because here's this Hall of Fame coach who's forgotten more baseball than I know, right? I'm sitting here trying to learn and things like that. And he would almost look at you like you're, what do you mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, he'd say, well, I'd say, I just, I don't understand why we do. Well, if they could hit it, hang it upside down, surely they could hit it standing on 2 feet. Remember how he'd say that? You know what I mean? And he'd always give me that figure. He's like, what do you mean? Like, if they're
Yeah,
hanging
yeah,
upside down, they're hitting the baseball. They stand on 2 feet. Certainly they're going to hit it. But the point was, maybe there was some hand-eye coordination. Anyone who's been around high school baseball knows gym practices they can get old real quick, in the first,
yeah.
2, 3 weeks. Funny story, long story short here, he was the master at that. He was the master at taking the smallest thing and almost inflating the confidence of his kids. So I've never looked at it as some far-fetched ability. He wasn't telling this kid who had this ability, that you're Ken Griffey Jr. But he was giving his kids more confidence to be just a little faster when they would steal base, to be just a little bit more confident in the box, a little bit more confident on fielding that ground ball that maybe they were struggling with, or those different things. So I knew you would enjoy that story, and I know we have a lot of people that will know of Don Neff and will kind of relate to what we're talking about. But don't you feel like in leadership, specifically even as a basketball coach, that there is a time where we are trying to get our kids to, even if it's just for a split second, play over their head. That's where the upsets come from, right? That's
Yeah.
where that's where the improvements come from. Kids get outside their comfort zone. So like when I look back, you're right, I was confident in my role, but what I would argue is you always want to be able to push your kids out of their comfort zone a little bit. How many times we say that, to where that's where the improvement comes from? Take me through that thought process in terms of how you're trying to push that limit to where you don't want to sell a kid short. You want to make sure you're maximizing their potential. We always say in sports, their ceiling versus their floor. It's your job as a coach to get them closer to that ceiling.
Yeah, it's funny. There is a combination of that, and I think that it's the ability to, of a coach to, help, I guess, push those limits of his team or even some of his individual players. I mean, think about it, Shane. We've done things. How many times as a basketball coach have you put drills together to purposely make it harder than what it'll be in a game, right? Like,
Right.
hey, we're going to see a team that's going to press us. So I'm giving the defense 6 guys or 7 guys, and they're going to press us today. We're going to go 5 versus 7 press breaker. Why? Well, that way, when you get in a game, you're going to feel better about it because you went, I mean, we've been going against 7 guys. And, how many, over the years, girls teams will bring in guys to scrimmage against a practice, or a boys team will go against older guys who are bigger, faster, stronger than them. Why? To make it tougher than what it'll be in a game. We're constantly doing those things as coaches. And I think all those things are necessary. I think it's a balance because, going back to your Donnie Neff thing of hitting upside down, right? Let's not pretend like they didn't spend way more time in the cage on 2 feet working on their swing, right? So like,
Right. Right.
it,
His team's hit a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't like, hey, we're just going to hit upside down and then go get her, guys. I mean, so the skill. What I'm saying is that skill was taught, that skill was developed, and the confidence originally came from preparation, right? But it was just expanded on because Donnie was one of these guys. He'd probably tell you, like, he wanted his teams to believe that they were different than everybody else. Well, these other teams aren't hitting upside down. We hit upside down. That was his mindset, right? And
Mhm.
I think there's some truth to that. I think there's some truth to, we used to have a sign on our locker room wall at Benton County, or I'm sure they still do, and it said, "What separates us?" When you walked out, what separates us? And what that means is we got every team we play is the same as us. They have 16, 17-year-old kids who want to win, who play basketball, who love their school. So why do we think we're any different than them? What ultimately separates us? And hopefully what separates you is all those things we just talked about, right? Your preparation, your hard work. But also, if a coach can do some things to where your program feels a little extra special, or a player feels a little extra special, I do think that goes a long way, like you're saying, to get a kid maybe to perform a little bit better on a given night than what they even are. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think you can just say, "Hey man, you're awesome. Believe you're awesome," and then never go work, right? Never put the work in. I don't think that works. But I think that, if long as it's in as long as it's right next to, or I guess, going along with the preparation, I think those things can be effective.
Well, the reason I bring that up, and I really think this is important to mention, is once you find that beautiful balance of talent and skill set along with confidence to put it all together and make it go, you obviously come up with some special things, whatever level we're talking about. Maybe it's a special level high school player, maybe it's a special level college player, maybe it's the greatest of all time. And when I think of the greatest of all time, and tell me if I'm wrong here, a lot of times the big time winners of all time, I don't know if they're the most talented that I've ever seen. So, like when I think of a Derek Jeter, if you go back, it was in the 40s somewhere on our show, like tonight's show 67. I think it's back in the mid 40s, around 45, 46, somewhere in there. Remember, Matt, we love that series we did with the Derek Jeter,
Right.
and we talked about when they were doing the show on him. Here's a guy with 5 rings, and I mean, you look at his career stats, it's like a whole year because he played like 158 career playoff games, right? Something stupid like that. And his performance on the biggest stage was unreal. But I would argue I could rattle off 4 or 5 players right off the top of my head in my lifetime that are better, that are more talented, in my opinion, than a Derek Jeter, right? Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds. You see what I'm saying? Like just boom, 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 boom. And but no one could quite win like him. The same way with like a Tom Brady. I mean, seven Super Bowl rings, 5 MVPs. But again, I would argue that I've watched more talented throwers of the football or different things. Just no one could quite perform under pressure or at the highest level than Tom Brady could. Remember when back like when a Peyton Manning was coming up? You remember a name by like Ryan Leaf? Remember how talented he was? What that wasn't a lack of talent, right? That wasn't a lack of confidence or whatever. But but the ability to win at a certain level or perform at a certain level isn't always just a talent thing. So we talk about talent being very important, and it is, but there has to be another side of this. And I could go on down the list. But as I start to think of some of these combinations, I think about how coachable they were, even at the highest level. When I think of a Tom Brady and a Bill Belichick, or I think of a Duncan and Pop, or a Jordan and a Dean Smith, and then eventually a Phil Jackson, and some of those the greatest. When it comes to confidence, there's a line of confidence to cocky where a true confident player wants to be coached. He or she wants to be pushed to another level. They want to lead by example where they bring others along. And I think that's what separates that most talented player may be able to individually go out and do things that no one else in their league or in their state or in their game can do, depending on what level, again, we're talking about. But the beauty of it is the true winners, the great winners, carry themselves with a confidence that not only allows themselves to be coached, which makes them better, but it almost becomes that culture piece that we put in play that allows the entire group around them. So the question, Matt, I wanted to talk to is I feel like confidence is infectious, right? If you have the right type of confidence, it starts to spread throughout your locker room. It starts to spread throughout your practice floor. It starts to spread throughout everything that you do in your program, and it goes. So talk to me about where you think confidence in leadership, confidence in your best player, confidence in your coaches, how that starts to impact others. Because I've always said the true sign of greatness is when your greatness makes people around you better.
Yeah, it's really kind of a complex question because when you start thinking about this stuff, okay, like you just mentioned some different, professional athletes or whatever, and you say, okay, well, like a Derek Jeter won more than those other guys. Well, in baseball, that could be due to a lot of different things, right? I mean, Derek
That's
Jeter
fair.
may have played with better players and better pitching staffs and bigger payrolls, right? And all those different things that might have led. um, you mentioned a Tom Brady, and like you said, there may have been more talented throwers, and there may have been, but you're talking about one of the most accurate passers ever. I mean, a guy that that perfected his craft. So I guess that part of it to me, because I think what ultimately happens is people who are are truly confident, okay, are confident because they have a technical understanding of their skill too, not just like we talked about their role, but like say you're shooting a basketball, right? Like I'll go in still today and I'll go through some shooting stuff. I'll go into the gym real late at night and I'll just shoot because it's just fun for me, and I sure as heck can't play. I'm not going to go out and go to open gym and play 5-on-5. That probably wouldn't be a real pretty sight, but I can still shoot a little bit. And I'll go in and I'll shoot. And when I do it, I always shoot free throws and I'll shoot them in groups of 25. And I always try to shoot 100 over the course of the night. And if I'm in there by myself shooting 100, I'm going to be pretty disappointed if I don't make 80ish or whatever. And the reason that is because when I stand at the free throw line, no matter how old I am or out of shape I am or whatever, I still technically understand the shot, right? I understand if I miss why I missed. Well, I missed that because it was my release was a little flat or my elbow was a little bit loose or and all these things can go through my mind. So I technically understand what I'm doing. So that gives me the ability, to tweak that or to fix that. And so whether I'm standing there in front of 1,000 people or by myself in the gym late at night, if I block all that out and I only think about the technical aspect of it, it gives me the ability to be correct at what I'm doing, right? And and so sometimes I think that's every bit as important as just the confidence. So I think guys like Tom Brady and guys like Derek Jeter, yes, they had this aura, or this sort of aura about them where they were confident, right? But I think they understood the technical part of their craft. They understood, and they could lean on that in those pressure situations. When everything was on the line. Now, to take it to your other part of your question, though, how it affects their teammates and all of that. I think that's very true. I think that confident people, um, attract other confident people, and I think they help others, increase their confidence. But what it comes down to, Shane, is you can't. Nobody's going to be confident in you unless you show them your ability to do it. The reason why, like,
Yeah.
those guys helped others be confident is they were confident in them. They knew Tom Brady was going to come through in the clutch. So you know what? Yeah, I'm confident. I'm confident as an offensive lineman because I got this guy here I'm blocking for. I'm confident as a receiver because he's throwing me the football, right? They're confident in his ability to do what he does, which in turn bleeds over. And I think that's why, if you're the type of leader that wants to instill confidence in others, wouldn't you agree, Shane, that they have to see you do it first? They have to truly be, they have to buy into what you're doing based on your previous performances. You've shown them, you know, what you're doing. As a coach, you've shown your players that you know how to make an in-game adjustment. You've shown your players you know how to prepare them for a big game. You've shown your players that you can help develop them better individually and help them be a better player, right? So I think you have to walk the walk, so to speak, if you want to have that effect on other people.
That's really good stuff, and I would take it in two parts. I think your best teams as you get older, they are capable of starting to develop that trust and that connection together. I would also challenge coaches, Matt. I think coaches have to do a great job of educating their team on these types of things, because I think what happens, what I found over the years, there's far better players than me that, you know, they had a lot of trust in me to dribble the basketball, right? So like it's like if we're putting a team together, these kids may be the best players, but man, this particular young man or young lady may be the point guard, and this person may be the defensive stopper, and this person may be, man, gosh, no one works harder than that. We've all coached that kid when when they maybe don't say much, but they work harder than anybody. And when they finally get mad in practice one time, and maybe they're borderline out of line, but they question someone's effort, you kind of let them go for a second, because you're like, no one in this gym's going to question them questioning someone's effort, right? Because they bring it every single night. No, that we've all coached that kid. So I think there has to be an appreciation for each other, an appreciation for all the different parts that make the puzzle complete. I love what you said there. And this will bring me to my last point. And then, I mean, by all means, clear your notebook as well. But I want to talk to you about something that I've always been really, really passionate about, and it's genuine leadership versus a little bit of the fake, okay, or a little bit of the stage, I call it. So when we're talking about being confident, and it starts to cross over that line to cocky, or that confident, and it's kind of put on, it's kind of fake, and you can almost see right through it. There's almost the built-in excuses. There's always the different thing, like, you know, um, you know, there's a reason I missed shots. There's a reason I turned it over. There's a reason I did this, and you and I've always talked about it a little bit in celebrations, right? Something will happen a little bit. Sometimes you can be a little cocky in those areas, and it's like, you know, we like that genuine passion. It's the same way here. I like a genuine confidence, but I don't need to have cocky. I don't need to have arrogance. You know what I'm saying? So, where's that fine line in terms of when you're working with kids? Because we've all had those kids before where they come across a little arrogant, and if not controlled, can be bad for the locker room. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I again, the word genuine stuck out to me there. I mean, that's really what it's all about. I think the most confident people, Shayne, are the ones who probably don't have to tell you how confident they are that much. I think because again, it's just a true feeling. It's a true, just, you just know, right? You deep down, you know that you're capable. Again, my definition of confidence, right? You know you're capable of performing your role to a really high level. You know that, and that's not something you have to be. I mean, think about, again, using professional athletes as example. I mean, use Derek Jeter and Tom Brady, right? Take those two guys. You know, do you think do you think they were confident athletes? I do. I think they were very confident in their ability. How much did they ever really talk about it? Take Ocho Cinco and Terrell Owens, right? I mean,
Uh,
are they as good? I mean, am I really supposed to believe they were as confident as Tom Brady and Derek Jeter? They sure acted like it, but they sure didn't perform like it. And they weren't terrible players, but they weren't players on that level. You understand what I'm saying? They had to constantly tell you, they had to constantly try to show everybody how confident they are. And I think that's where you get into that fake stuff you're talking about, where it's not genuine, because I think a lot of times people who act like that really aren't deep down that confident. And you've seen it in other walks of life. As an educator, you see it all the time, right? Kids will be like, well, you didn't do very well on this test. Ah, man, I didn't care about that. I don't care
yeah.
about that test. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Well, you probably did, but you didn't study, and you don't want to admit that you let yourself down. And so it's again, it's like you said, the excuses that go along with that. So no, I think that what we're trying to develop as coaches on our teams is that true confidence. Each We want each of our players to have that within their role, and have that in each other. Um, and I think that sometimes humility isn't just a nice characteristic to have because it makes you more likable. I think sometimes you have to have a little bit of that to truly be confident, because when you start bringing all that other stuff into play of wanting to talk and wanting to run your mouth and wanting to, it's a distraction. What it really comes down to, it's a distraction. And when you have those distractions, it's hard to go back to prepare and perfect your role, right? Because you're distracted with doing all this other nonsense. So I think sometimes as a coach, that's one of the things with high school kids, especially, you're dealing with teenagers and there's some immaturity there that you have to try to help them work through.
Yeah, Matt, as I transition to the final thought, something kind of came to my mind there that kind of will lead into what I was going to talk about in this final segment. But as you were talking there, it really got me thinking from a coaching standpoint. And I guess this could even be a captain on the floor in the locker room. As a leader, don't you have to have the confidence at some point to step up and say something or to make a call? Coaching, obviously, for sure, right? There has to be a confidence in some of the most pressure situations to say, we're going to do this right here. We're going to do it this way. This is, what we haven't talked much about the confidence in coaching, but in leadership, isn't there isn't there a form of confidence? You have to be able to stand in front of a group of people. I've talked to a lot of coaches. Some coaches this year are enjoying some incredible seasons. I just talked to a coach the other night that's probably going to go 20-2 at the end of the year. I've also talked to some coaches that are going to struggle to get to 4 or 5 regular season wins. And when you're standing in front of a team in basketball season's long. Think about how many huddles you're in. Think about how many halftime speeches you're given. How many times you walk into a locker room and you can only give the same speech so much when you're on a 4 and then a 6 and an 8 game losing streak, right? And it's tough. What what's the confidence in terms of delivery that you found in coaching that's very, very important as you're addressing your team?
Well, I think ultimately, and it goes back to what I said right at the beginning of the show, Shayne, for me, which is, confidence isn't the absence of nervousness, right? We all know, I think, athletes, coaches, that we know that there's, a chance of failure.
Mm,
It comes with the job, right? It comes with the sport. And you said you have to have confidence enough to step up and make a tough decision as a coach or as a player. You got to have confidence if it's your role and the coach calls on you. You got to have confidence enough to take that shot, with 2 seconds on the clock, or you got to be confident enough to, to you know, guard a guy, guard the other
I
team's
always
best
say you got to
player
be
for.
good enough to make it, mature enough to miss it.
Yeah, right. You've got to know. So I think confidence, I think a lot of what confidence is being willing to do it anyway, knowing the
Yeah, I like
risk,
that. Yeah, yeah,
knowing the risk and being willing to do it anyway. And again, because truly confident people understand they may lose. I really believe that. I think confident people understand that it could happen. I think confident people understand that they could miss that last second shot, but I think they're willing to do it anyway because they know they've put the time in. They know that's their role. They know how much they've prepared for it. I can honestly tell you this as a coach, and I don't know how many games I've coached in. Well, I don't, somewhere around 500 games maybe I've coached in. I don't know, and I can honestly tell you this: I do not remember a game in my life that I wasn't nervous for as a coach. I was nervous for every single one, but I don't believe I lack confidence. I don't, because I never went. There was hardly ever a game I went into that I hadn't convinced myself we had a chance to win. Even though there were some games I went into, looking back, I thought I would I would tell you, yeah, we probably didn't have much chance to win that game. But I had typically going into a game convinced myself we had a shot, and I convinced myself of that because of all the preparation I'd put into it, the film study, the game planning, the practices, you know, the scouting, just all that stuff, right? And I had convinced myself, well, if we do this and we do this and we do this, we've got a shot to win, and if you get beat by 35, then you look back like, how did I think that we had a chance to win, right? But that's where the confidence comes into play. But I can promise you this: it wasn't because I was free of nerves. I mean, I was nervous every single time. I was nervous as a player back in high school. I can remember getting myself so worked up I'd almost have a coughing fit sometimes before a game because it's just the anxiousness, that went along with wanting to get started and wanting to play. But you joked around earlier and told me I didn't lack confidence, as a player. But the nerves were still there. The doubt was still there. I had doubts. I doubted myself at times. Didn't mean though that I wouldn't go ahead and play my role and do what I was supposed to do. So I think a lot of times that confidence is the willingness to do it, even though you know the risk.
yeah. That's really well said. I think in my final thought, and then I'll give you the final word before I get us out of here. I, I always try to circle back in final thought, and I try to be the solution. I mean, a lot of times I never want to be a podcast where we just come on here and it's hey, here's the problem, go figure it out. I mean, I want to try to have discussion. I want to try to have solution. I think what I would challenge coaches, challenge captains to do, challenge all athletes to do in their individual abilities and their individual roles is to develop an IQ and develop an awareness of what's going on in these areas that we've talked about here tonight. Like I would challenge coaches, like I think we have a lot of good coaches out there. As I watch teams play and I talk to coaches, I think they can talk to you about, hey, here's what I believe defensively, here's what I believe offensively. Hey, on the out of bounds plays, I like to do some of these things. I like to do this in terms of tempo, but I would challenge coaches, can you go up and down your roster and can you tell me the personality traits of every single kid? Can you tell me who's confident and who's not? And can you tell me what they're confident in and what scares them to death, right? In terms of, and I think in leadership, that's all so important because I think it goes back to that relationship foundation when we talk about this, because again, even though I gave a literal definition clear back at the beginning that used words like trust and self assurance and all of these different things, let's face it, it's a little bit abstract, right? We know it's there. I don't know if we can see it. We can see characteristics of it. We can see it kind of in someone's actions or their play or their voice, but there's a lot of dynamic there that I think leaders have to be aware of, and I think we have to make sure that we're putting people in certain places. But I would also caution, as we said in the one segment tonight, Matt, not to sell it short. Every now and then it is okay to see if you can't get them to push to another level, right? To play over their head, as we like to say, because I think that's what pushes the limits, and I think that's what gets people far closer to that ceiling that we mentioned earlier instead of the floor. So that's kind of my final thought. I'll give you the final word, and then I'll kind of give some info here and get us out of here.
I think for me, Shane, I would just leave it at this. I think that confidence is sort of that, like I think in athletics, it's sort of that um, hidden treasure, right? It's what everybody's looking for. It's what everybody wants, right? Like everybody wants to be more confident. Everybody wants to coach more confident players. Uh, every player wants to be more confident in what they do. Um, and no matter what sports you're playing, or and maybe no matter even what walk of life, right? You just want to be more confident in your job place and your relationships or whatever. But I think a lot of times, and you've said it before, we live in that kind of society where we want the instant result, and we want it right now. And I think sometimes we want confidence to be something like we can order and have it delivered from Amazon. We want it right then and just be able to implement it. And I think what makes confidence tough, it's a lengthy process sometimes to develop it. It really is because it takes the preparation and the work and the commitment to 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 get your skill set to a place where you can actually truly in your heart feel confident. So I think for me, confidence it's hard work. I mean, it takes time. It has to be developed. I don't look at it as something, like you're born with. I don't look at it as, well, this person's just naturally confident. You mentioned personalities earlier. I do think some people have a personality that might make it easier for them to get there, but ultimately I think it is an earned and a learned characteristic more than it is a natural type of thing. And I think that's where we have to start, because if we start there, then we get away from the comments like he's just got to be more confident.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
he's got to be more skilled. And if he's more skilled, he'll be more confident. He's got to be more skilled within his role, and then he'll be more confident, right? I think we need to get away from that, talking about it like it's just something that you got to reach out there and grab, and we've got to start thinking about it more from a technical standpoint if it's something that's got to be developed.
Yeah, that's just really, really good. I think if you haven't had a chance to catch up here on expanding the zone, if you've had a chance to listen going back a couple weeks to positionless basketball on 65, 66, we then tied in the IQ, Matt, with the mental side of it. And then tonight we kind of tie in a confidence level that can impact or kind of marry all that together. I think that's a really good 3 week segment that people really, really enjoy. So if you're still catching up on expanding the zone, check it out on YouTube, check it out on the podcast app. I think you'll really enjoy those. We still have plenty. The calendar turning to February here, and then obviously there's no better month of basketball than March. So Matt, we have plenty of basketball to go. I know we're getting good show ideas from people. You and I have kind of flirted with taking some of the feedback and putting them in. Talking a little bit of postseason honors, talking about a little offense defense. We had a mixed bag where we might just go through a variety of topics. So I think people are still in for plenty of basketball discussion here over these next couple months, and we look forward to. Thanks as always, Dr. Chris Good, for the support on the YouTube channel. Again, YouTube or podcast app. Can't thank you enough for all the support on expanding the zone. Look forward to getting back talking to basketball with you next week. Thanks, everyone.